Welcome to Tachino Savi, the podcast where we reclaim our stories, voices, and indigenous heritage. I'm your host, Eulogio Espinosa, and together we'll explore the journey of our pueblos and how we arrived in the U.S., the traditions we carry, and the challenges we navigate. In each episode, we'll share personal stories, history, and the power of indigenous identity through language, music, and community. And today's debut episode, I have Miguel Villegas joining us. Miguel Villegas is also known as Onaisu, a trilingual rapper who amplifies indigenous voices through music. Miguel, whose artistic name Onaisu means eight deer. His music blends Spanish, English, and Mixteco, weaving powerful narratives about identity, immigration, and indigenous resilience. Beyond his music, Miguel is a dedicated community advocate, interpreter, and cultural organizer. His work bridges generations, preserving language and tradition while pushing for visibility and empowerment. Join us as we dive into the history of our community and their journey into the US, the stories that shapes our communities and the journey that shaped us. So let's give Miguel a very well welcome and let's get started with our very first podcast. So Miguel, introduce yourself a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Qué tal? Ako kwe wa chiko jikwi na tesonaro. ¿Cómo están? How y'all doing? My name is Miguel Villegas Ventura, and I am from San Miguel Cuevas, Custlahuaca, Oaxaca, which is a neighboring town there, of Elogios town, San Juan Piñas. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be part of this podcast. We've been talking about it a lot, so I think it's time for us to do it and make it happen. So I'm really happy. I'm excited for what we're gonna talk about.
As well. And yeah, we have been talking about this podcast to have a sit down and talk about this. And we want to talk about different things, cultural things, our traditions, our ways of living, but also our language and the way that we understand information and how we bring our tradition from our hometown, from my hometown, San Juan Piñas, to here in the United States or to other parts of the regions in Mexico, such as Tijuana, in Sonora, Veracruz, and in the city of Mexico as well. And here in the U.S., our community has established their roots here in San Diego area, in the Southern California, Central Coast, North Bay area, in Fairfield, Vallejo, Central Valley as well, and in other states, Washington, Oregon, uh, Florida as well. So I want to start off this podcast of asking Miguel here. Uh, so, what was your upbringing here, like school here in your early years of being here in the U.S.?
The U.S. Well, I arrived in the U.S. when I was 7 years old. So typically, well, most people before us, and I think you already know this, they will migrate to different parts. Like the first migrations, like they're different stages of migration,
Yeah.
huh? Like from my town, I specifically, and probably it might be similar to your town. Our grandparents will migrate to Veracruz, Veracruz for the sugarcane um, agriculture work. They will pick sugarcane. And then some of them will go to Mexico City to work as domestic workers. And then I guess the first stage was the closest.
Like this would be like our parents and their parents, right? Our grandparents, they
Yeah.
before the U.S., they have migrated other parts in the states of Mexico, such as Veracruz was one of the um, first ones that I know of that the people
Yeah.
migrated for the sugar cane, as you mentioned. And there are people from Oaxaca that set roots there as well. And there are people that speak Mixteco in Veracruz,
Yeah,
even though Mixteco is not originally from Veracruz, but there are people there.
they established
Yeah,
themselves
yeah,
there.
they established themselves there, and then from there, either they interact with other Mexican from other migrants, and then they started migrating closer to the border to Sonora,
Right,
Hermosillo, Culiacan, San Quintin, working in the tomatoes, right?
right.
In the mid 80s, or even late 80s, they still migrated there. And when was your town first kind of migrate to the U.S. Where because we call it Ingashillo, which means el otro lado,
Engacho, igualito,
Ingashillo,
igualito, engacho.
and sometimes they'll call it Ñunato, which is el tierra de los extranjeros. To'o es una palabra de extranjero, foreño, or outsider que, that we use, and we call it Ingashio, and that was because they in Spanish they call it al otro lado,
Yeah.
and so that's why we started calling it Ingashio. So U.S. for us is Ingashio,
So it would be specifically U.S., not
not anywhere
like
else. Yeah,
Sonora,
yeah.
Sinaloa.
So the way we call, I guess before we move on, the way we call like Sonora, San Quintin, or like Hermosillo, we will call it Chisata.
Oh, wow.
Chisata ni cara, Chisata ni cara, esa chingadera. Y se refieren que está en México, pero de del lado de México, no del otro lado.
So because the places are like described as living things too, right?
Yeah.
Like the
Or
head, the feet,
yeah, the
and
directional,
behind it. Yeah.
like kind of like a literal directional. So when they call chisata, it would be like behind, but it also refers to something of being south, right? It's like south, even though Tijuana is not south of Oaxaca because it's north of Oaxaca, but we still call it south.
Well, I'm just curious. Like that's very important because well, we will say Incacho U.S. for sure,
Mm,
and the other parts will be Norte
mm,
for us. But what you're saying is it could be more deeper than that because who says the direction should be the Western version? Like I have heard like people like flipping it, and the Norte could be Chile, South America could be at the top, and North
yeah,
America could be the bottom. Like if you flip it, like it's just this narrative, the power, no, the power.
yeah, but it also has to do with perspective of the direction you are at.
Yeah, yeah.
For example, our town is inclined as from a place that's like heading up to north. So for us, Chinino is actually heading north,
Mhm.
and south would be Chiva for nosotros, Chisata, Chiva.
So question, that's what I was gonna say. For some reason, Veracruz is not as Chiva for me, for
Uh-huh,
my town.
uh-huh,
Like even am I thinking we were talking about earlier, like the road to go to Oaxaca, right?
uh-huh.
But to us, there's a road to go to Oaxaca, but a road to go to Veracruz for some reason. I don't know if it means like to go down to Oaxaca and then eventually figure out how to go to Veracruz. I don't even know. Do you know the path that they're taking to go to Veracruz? Do they have to go up or?
Uh, well, they have to go up north, but I'm not
Right.
sure. Now that there's carreteras or there's the big carreteras,
Yeah,
the Huajuapan Cuislavaca carretera. It's where is it, Chico? Putla and Huajuapan carretera, right? That passes
yeah.
that passes Cuislavaca. Your town migrated here around the same time as my town, right?
Right,
Somewhere
right.
Piñas, which would be early 80s, mid
Early 80s.
80s. Um, I guess before we go back and diving a bit deeper into our town, the question was to you that how was it being migrated here or for
Right.
your experience in school?
So that's why I was mentioning that Veracruz was in the. So I gotta get to that, right? I was gonna explain to you the years. Veracruz was, I'm assuming about 50s, 60s. That was our grandparents, and then the Mexico City and Sinaloa, Sonora, in Baja California. That was our parents, well, at least for my parents, they will
Mm,
migrate there. So that would be like what 70s. probably close to 80s
Hmm.
might be the time frame. And then 80s, um, are there were males migrating. I don't know if that was in your
Yeah,
town.
yeah, it's
So
the same.
mostly
Yeah,
males were migrating in 80s, and that's how they. I don't know if the Barcelo thing happened like in the 60s, right? The
uh,
Barcelo program. I don't know if that played a big role in them. Like instead of going to just Mexico, town cities, they eventually find out that there's agricultural work in U.S. So, but maybe they were the people closest to the border, like Sinaloa, Michoacan, and even the closest Baja California, they will already go
migrating.
to
Yeah,
U.S. Right?
yeah,
So eventually, somehow our parents find out, and then my dad will migrate in the 80s. So he was able to, he was already in California when the 86 amnesty
amnestic.
happened with
Yes,
Ronald
yeah.
Reagan. So there was a lot of people from my town that took advantage of that, that figured out how to navigate the
Mm.
system. And there was others that they were like, I don't need it. Why I gotta pay money for this when I could migrate back and forth, right? It was easy
Yeah,
back then.
and there's a lot of incredible, interesting stories, and some of it I have not. Throughout some of the brief and small research I've done of like the Bracero movement, and some of it's pretty vague, like, oh yeah, the Mexican came during this program, and then the amnesty happened, and they helped the undocumented one. But in the stories from our town was similar to you. The timeline is about the same. They were afraid because one of the things of a condition of getting the green card during the amnesty was
Mm-hmm.
that you had to swear that you would protect the U.S. or be part of the military, and some people saw that as like well, the U.S. has conflict with other nations. Am I really gonna get this card and then go to war for a country that's not mine? So they were afraid, and there's a lot of what we call today misinformation, right?
Yeah.
So people were afraid, and then because that was still during wartime or conflict time, the U.S. had with other countries. So
Mm-hmm.
there was a true fear factor of like saying, I'm not gonna get this card. I don't really need it, and well, if I get it, well, they're gonna just send me to war, so I'm not gonna do it. And my father got the amnesty through help of his uncles, I believe. I could be I could be wrong, but I think I vaguely remember that they did say that his uncle helped him get his paper, and he was young at that time, so
Mm-hmm.
he has already migrated in different schools and stuff, but he was new to migrating in the U.S. and he was able to get his green card through the amnesty as well.
Right, and in addition, I am to when you become citizen, you have to leave your nationality. That
Mm,
was the narrative back then.
yes, that
I'm not
was
saying it was because by 2002 around there it changed. You didn't need to like swear like you're gonna leave
the
the
other
other
country.
country. So I imagine that people were afraid of that. So um and obviously, because of the war, they needed people to work the land, right? So
Yeah.
they needed the people. So it was, it was because they really needed people, and it was easier back then a
Yeah.
little bit. But so the thing is that most males were in California,
Yeah.
well, California, right?
California,
Like for your
southern,
town,
southern, yeah,
and the moms will stay in
in
town,
town.
or
Or sometimes they'll be left in San Quintin, and then they make up money, and then they bring into U.S. because in the late 80s and early 90s, and even still in the early 2000s,
mm-hmm,
people didn't live in houses. Renting houses was difficult,
mm-hmm,
not just language issue or legal status issue, but money, financial reasons. But they didn't live in houses or apartments. They lived it out close to the creeks or rivers. There's a couple of small towns. Well, they used to be small. They're pretty big in San Diego County now, such as Peñasquito or Poway. And there's other places I don't know the exact name of it, but I
yep,
know they did show me where the river passed by or creek passed by, and that used to be a big encampment that a lot of farm workers used to live at.
Wow. You know what? That's good that you mentioned that because I'm pretty sure I have to ask the older people because they mentioned that the first part it wasn't Fresno, it was San
It
Diego.
was San Diego.
They were living camp, but also they were living on the wilderness,
Yeah, it was.
right?
Yeah,
Maybe it was
yeah.
the same.
It's the same area, the Peñasquito area, and Peñasquito, Poway, and what was it? Poway used to be all forest or
Yeah,
all forest. It wasn't until in the late 90s that it became more of a city, I think. But they did show me where they did live, and a lot of it was just tarps and sometimes the grass area or wood that were
yeah.
growing there. They'll bend it and they'll make housing. And we're not talking about like a few dozen people. You're talking about closer to like hundreds of people that used to live here.
Man.
And there's a lot of interesting story on this that I have talked to with folks that lived it because I didn't I didn't live that, but I did see the area where they talk about was that some men, because there were small amount of jobs, because there was a lot of people there. So some men that got the job at the ranch there, and I think one of the ranch still exists. I don't even remember the name.
Mhm.
So it still exists, and so some of the males that came first, or some of them that got lucky that got the job, or the foreman or the bosses saw that were stronger,
Yeah, yeah.
they hired them, and those the others didn't have the job. They had to stay like at that camp area, and they'll help wash clothes or cook because that way those that made money would like sort of support them with food and stuff like
Really, that's interesting.
yeah. And there's a lot more interesting story in there because there was also people come and sell things there from hats, bandana, pants, and stuff like that. And we'll probably censor this part too. Prostitution as well was a
No
common occurrence
way.
there. Yes.
Oh,
So
that's
so
crazy.
there was a lot of things that happened there. And again, it was mostly male that lived there. There were women and even some children that probably lived in those areas. Not anymore. Those areas,
No,
they're cities now.
definitely. So yeah, man, this is a very interesting topic, but I was touching upon that because I want to like just paint the process of us coming here and how I came over here, right? So uh
Your fault.
we pretty much probably live the same camp because we're neighboring town and you know the people
Mm-hmm.
we have
Mm-hmm.
networks and somehow I'm pretty sure we were mixed because we did come to San Diego as well in the beginning. And then we ended up, and then the males, when they got to Fresno for some reason, there was a camp in Fresno too. It's
Mm-hmm.
called Campo Tung, which is a camp that still, today, it still operates. And there's still some males there, but most males from my town went through that camp. They had to cook there, they had to do everything there. And even the junta, barely like 2 years ago, we stopped doing juntas there for our committee, the Mi Pueblo, because
Um,
we will always do it there, you
but
know?
it became a landmark for the
Yeah,
community
exactly.
there, right? Yes.
And now people have houses and ranches, so now we just meet up
Meet up
wherever
at
they are.
someone's
Yeah,
house.
it was crazy. You know, when you saw most males were there and they would just go back and forth. But from my experience, most fathers by the early 90s for my town, they started bringing their family already. I don't know if it was because of amnesty that, they're like, you know what, I want to establish myself in California now because it's getting expensive, or because they just said "Yeah, it's going to be harder to come back and forth again." So most parents already brought their wives. So most people from my town, my age range, were born in Fresno,
Yeah.
and I was one of the few that didn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't born in California, but um,
And to give a time frame here, what year were you born?
huh?
What year were you
I
born?
was born in '89.
In 89. So,
'89, so 80. I guess the most people my age were '90s now. They
yeah.
were born 90,
Uh,
91, 92.
and for us, it's similar. Well, my father was already here in the mid 80s and late 80s, and so he traveled quite a bit. My father got married with my mother around the 89 or 90,
Okay.
and then they had my 89, I think they got married, and then in the 90 they had my sister. And then my father was still traveling, coming in back and forth. And from what I remember from what he talks and what other talks is that uh, they learned it that you could bring your family with the green card. It wasn't just exclusively to you because that's what was the idea or that's what they understood at first, that the green card was just for you.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
And they
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
know that you could bring your family with the green card. And once
Oh,
they got that information, it's like, oh, so I could bring my. So then they started like, well, those that had money, had the resource, financial resource, uh, brought their family much more quicker. Those that didn't, well, it took them a bit more time, and then they came. So we came in the U.S. in 1997, and that was when I was 3 years old that I got here in the U.S.
97.
Yeah,
So I got here in 97. But also,
you were
well,
7.
you know what? We're already gonna, with that, we're already gonna figure out our age range
Mhm.
because I was seven when I got here in 97. I was born 89, so I was seven. And, but, funny thing, I didn't come through my father because my father, I think, my, my father was already having issues with my mom since 95.
Mm.
I don't know. To him, it was just I'm gonna go back and I bring clothes and whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the reasons that I think he didn't bring my mom or didn't bring all of us, it was because he was already, having another family.
Another life in the
So
US.
that was his focus. So my mom and him separated that year, 96, 97, definitely because we had to leave the house and then we ended up going with our abuelita, our grandparents. So my mom, she did everything to sustain, like
Yeah.
she will cook, she will sell tamales, she will sell food, she will sell chicharrones in the schools.
Here in US or over there in
No,
Mexico.
in
In
Mexico.
Mexico, okay.
But at some point, you're like you couldn't do so much. So my uncle got married in 96, 97. It's that same age range.
Hmm.
And the honeymoon will be going to El Norte or going to Ingasho to pay the debts for the dwelling.
Hmm.
So that's kind of like the similar pattern of people when they get
Yeah.
married. They will go to Ensenada, they will go to
Yeah.
Culiacan, whatever, and work together so you
Yeah.
could pay, la boda, the
Yeah.
wedding. And because you have to borrow money, you don't have that much money
Yeah.
for a wedding, and the people go crazy for the wedding, like the banda, the the reses, the bulls. You have to kill certain bulls. You have to. It's a big thing.
And a very big difference in comparison to here in the US where or other Mexican and other regions. It's like when they have wedding, it's a close family thing where it's like your close family, cousin, maybe second cousins.
Uh-huh.
And in our town, when the wedding is happens over there, it's the whole town is invited. And a lot
Exactly.
of times, like your family with other family, and they come, uh, and then like just two degrees of people, I guess you would say that's the whole town already,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
From your mom's side or then from your dad's side, then that's already a lot of people. So it's like it costs money to basically invite everyone, and it's really rude to not invite everyone or have a wedding and not invite people or have a closed sort of wedding, because they view it as well. The whole town is witness, or the whole family and whole town is witness to your marriage.
I remember that wedding. Like 96, 97. I remember the grupos. I remember it's the whole town, and then even like it's a payback. It's a communal thing in the sense that all the señoras will go and help make the food. All the señoras will help and do the things that you need to get done to kill the bull, basically. So once it's somebody else wedding, then we go too,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
it's like that. Just it's the same thing with when somebody dies.
yeah.
So my mom, for some reason, well, there was four of us, so
Mhm.
her alone, I think, I'm assuming, just like everybody else, it wasn't enough. So she said, she asked my uncle, like, can she go with him,
Yeah,
to California? Can she come to California? And and then so that's when they decided in '97, around February, they migrated here, and that's when, and me speaking Mixteco in town with all my friends and just living, I have never left, the town.
Mhm.
So the most that I will go will be Slovak, and that's it, But Spanish wasn't really used in my town. So um, I guess like most of us, we will try to figure it out when a teacher or when somebody from outside will talk to us. But we can't really speak it as like we would like to. But we mostly spoke Mixteco. So when I came to Fresno, when I got to Fresno, it was like, man, it's a different world for me because you're in the
That
city.
the house is different, the
Yeah.
roads, the cars.
So the first we move. You know how when you migrate, you live with the closest network you have.
Yeah, yes, yes.
So we moved in with an uncle temporarily while we were waiting, because when we cross different times,
Hmm.
whether we make it or not, you wait until everybody arrives. So it was very challenging, uh, and then we eventually moved in with the aunt that was already established, and I had to go to school. It wasn't a bilingual school, so because my teacher was white and she only spoke English, so they needed to figure it out. I think they got me an interpreter to work with me one on one
Yeah,
because, and then I was learning Spanish también, like
it's like learning two languages.
yeah. So it was a little bit challenging, I think. But again, I was a kid too that I was picking up, but
Yeah, yeah.
I was picking it up. But it wasn't until I only stayed 1 year there, and then I moved to another place. We got an apartment eventually. You know how you first arrive, you work to pay the coyote,
Yeah,
and then you save to buy an apartment or get an apartment,
yeah,
and then there you start getting better economically. But um by the time we got into an apartment when I was in first grade, second grade, then I got into a bilingual school, which all the Mexicanos spoke Espanol.
Spanish.
I don't know if that was the experience in Santa Maria. How was the
Uh,
dynamic?
so okay, yeah. The dynamic in my school. So first of all, we got here in the '97. I didn't went to school until 1999, so it was like 2 years, 3 years that I was just at home. But my older brother and older sister went to school, and I have not really talked about them their experience. However, they had one each other because they were in the same class up until I think seventh grade in junior high. So
Mm.
they were together in kindergarten up to sixth grade, and then 1 year in junior high, I believe. Um, so they were always in the same classroom, and
Were they the same age?
they were 2 years apart.
And they were in the same
Yeah, they
classroom?
were in the
How
same
is
classroom.
that possible?
I don't know.
Maybe because they put them, they could help each other or
Yeah,
something?
yeah. And also they were learning at the same time, like,
Oh, wow.
and just similar like in your town, we don't speak Spanish at all. It's mostly just Mixteco. So they were getting to school and they learn English. They were already in school for 2 years, although I didn't understand English at all because in house we don't
Yeah.
speak in English. But my brother and sisters seemed to understand this other language that I couldn't comprehend. And Spanish was nothing at home. Like my father and mother never spoke it to us or
Hmm.
never tried it to even like mention words like vámonos or quédate quieto, stuff like that. It was everything
No.
was in Mixteco. Although like the TV that they watched, the novela, the music they watch was all in Spanish and some in Mixteco, well, the music in Mixteco. Um, so then I go into school and I kind of have a sense of what a school is because of my siblings that they were already
Hmm.
going. And I went to a school that wasn't majority like Anglo American, but it wasn't the schools that had a lot more Hispanic either.
Mm.
Uh, uh, Miller, so I went to Miller Elementary School here in Santa Maria, in the late 90s and early 2000. It wasn't a lot of Hispanic there. There were Hispanics, but just not a lot. And in comparison to like Alvin or Adams, where they are surrounded by apartments, and just as you were mentioning, a lot of
Oh
families
yeah.
moving to apartments. So we lived at a house, and we lived there right at a block difference. So behind of the street where we lived, behind of the street to the west in Thornburg, and I think Thornburg and Pine Street. All those other kids that lived in that area, they went to Adams School, but because I lived in Lincoln, I went into Miller Elementary School. So it was there were some Hispanic, but there was the Hispanics were mostly like second generation Hispanic kids
Okay,
anymore
yeah, yeah,
here.
yeah.
So they spoke some Spanish, but not a lot.
But they mostly spoke English.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it was just interesting getting used to going to school. I remember I remember the first day of school. We go eating breakfast. I went with my sister, and we walked to school. So we always walked into school unless it was raining day. Then our parents took us. I walked with my sister and her friend. So then she takes me to kindergarten area, which was separated from the first grade and
Yeah,
sixth
yeah.
grade, and she knows the school already because she was in that kindergarten. So I was there, and then I essentially flunked it. I don't know if they registered me late in kindergarten, so I had to be in kindergarten for like an extra year, or well, another second year of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and that was interesting. I learned it quick. I made quick friends. I was sociable, shy, but also sociable when I wanted to. And then, well, I learned the English. I just spoke English throughout elementary school. I didn't really speak Spanish. Interesting because by third grade and fourth grade, there were new students coming in, or new migrants that were coming in. They were pairing me
Responsibility.
with the new kids that only spoke Spanish so that I could teach them
Were
because
there Mixteco originals
no,
or
they
other
they,
states?
they were
Other states.
other states,
Okay, okay, okay.
and I just couldn't even like
But you
branch
were
out
not.
from.
You didn't
I
speak
didn't speak
Spanish,
Spanish at all.
so it's a barrier there, no?
Yeah.
Damn, that's crazy that you mentioned that because you pretty much you one of those few that skip, not skip. Yeah, skip Spanish, but not because by choice and not because your family chose that. You know what? You have to learn English first. It was mostly because it wasn't spoken at home
Hmm.
and at school you were learning
Learning
English,
English. Yeah.
which is a new experience of people now, like the new migrations that, especially people from Guerrero who don't speak Spanish, their house don't speak Spanish, so they skip Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, up till now, people like teachers or staff or faculty, whatever, they assume that oh, you have to know Spanish because you're from Mexico,
Yeah.
no?
Yeah.
But that already was happening with your experience because at least us, didn't skip it because the neighborhood hablaba español, but because at school I got to be in a bilingual school.
Uh,
You arrived here when you were 3.
mhm.
Okay, so we'll get into that because that's a little bit interesting your experience. Um, but my first neighbor, there was no obstacles at all. So it's one of those cases that even up till now people still ask that question like how do you navigate, how do you conserve the language, but or how do you feel that you belong, whatever. No, so the first time it was in the apartments that we had, there was nobody speaking Mixteco other than us in the family, no. And then but the rest spoke English same way, same like you. There were Anglo Saxon or second generation Mexicanos who didn't even speak
And
Spanish.
each time I talk about how I know how I preserve the language and how I know a lot of the variant is so we call this exposure to the other languages, so we just call it exposure. And so as I mentioned, my father had a green card and he was able to rent a house after a year living with his friends. Then
Mm-hmm.
we moved there not far away from that area, like two actually like 2 blocks and a half away from that. And he was able to get this house. And at this house, he it was a 3 bedroom house and had a garage for 2 cars. And like Miguel was mentioning earlier in this conversation about how the migrants that had came here would help other migrants live there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what exactly my father did. And having been able to rent this house, him and mother working, and his family, his sister and his mother also working and contributing to the rent. And then the other new migrants that were coming in, they would stay at our house. And at first, there will be people like our cousins, there will be people from our town. But as word spreads out, other towns need from Santa Rosa, which is close to Huitzlahuaca.
Yeah.
Forgot the name, Santa Rosa,
Kaslawaka.
Huitzlahuaca,
Mm-hmm.
from that region. And then the other regions in our area, San Jose, Yoso Cañon, Yucucani, partes de Guerrero too. So all these other migrants are coming into our house, living there for a couple months or sometimes about a year, and they'll rent out the garage or rent out the room depending on the availability of the places. And a lot of them spoke Mixteco. Some spoke Spanish in between them, but because as a kid we didn't speak Spanish, so we will speak
Mm-hmm.
in Mixteco with them. And I've been interpreting for people since I could read, since I was in first grade. I would go with these people, help them purchase things at a store, car dealership when they needed to purchase a car and stuff like that. So we would, and it wasn't just the people that lived with us too. It was people that maybe used to live with us but moved out, and they'll be like, "Hey, well, los hijos de Cecilia hablan inglés. Let's go to them. Let's go to them." So that was a common occurrence that happened at my house at my household at our home. So yeah, we could say we've been interpreting since 2002. So since I was in first and second grade.
Damn. So, question. You mentioned two things. One, it was you were the smartest one, in the sense that you knew more than the rest, or the teacher realized that you knew more than the rest. How was that? How was that
Okay.
dynamic of you understanding that you know what? These people no saben nada, they don't know nothing, in that sense.
A lot of people, I think, saw the potential of being able to interpret or use being trilingual, even though at that time we weren't trilingual. Um, Miss Epperson, which was our third grade teacher, my third grade teacher, and also my sister and brother's third grade teacher,
Yeah.
they saw that there was potential in that. I think the school kind of knew us too, because we weren't shy about people knowing that we spoke Mixteco. So like all my friends knew I spoke Mixteco. It was not sort of like something I was hiding. I mean, obviously I didn't speak Mixteco to them, but when they go over to my house, they hear that me and my mom are talking in Mixteco, you know. And
Why do you think the common dynamic? Well, there's two ways about it. Well, there's many factors, but somehow, like when we're kids, well, here's the thing: when we're first, second, third, like we're not really conscious. We didn't care about that stuff. At least most people, I think. But once we grow older, we start realizing
we're
the
con-
difference y todo eso.
this,
Um, and up till now, it's different because there's so many that they become targeted, right? But I feel like maybe um, it wasn't a big deal. Maybe like
I,
why do you think you weren't shy about it? Like,
I
what was the dynamic for you?
I truly don't know th- because I think there's a lot of factors that comes into play here. First
Yeah.
of all, my father never tried to speak with us in Spanish, and he was always proud of where he's from.
Okay.
At a very early age, we knew that we were from San Juan Piñas, even though we didn't know where it was, but we knew we were from San Juan
Okay.
Piñas. And there was always my father kind of understood that that he was a nativo de
Oh yeah.
Mexico. Yeah. So that's the word he would use. Soy nativo de San Juan Piñas.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Which is two things, right? The
Right.
native, the Native American,
Uh-huh.
pero the native of like you this is where you belong, like
Uh-huh.
you part of this place, no?
Uh-huh.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. But
And then the school we went in because there weren't a lot of Mexican immigrant Hispanic from other parts of Mexico, so there was no bullying. Uh,
exactly that's what
at
I'm
least
getting at.
at least from my experience, I never received the bullying from kids in school and in elementary. And that also probably had to do with, well, I was smart, but also I played it, the sports, basketball, soccer, dodgeball, uh, and all these other sports.
You blended in really well.
Yeah,
Because you already said you didn't had an accent, and that's the first thing that I was told
yeah,
before the
and
accent.
then from later on in life as an adult, when people tells me that they went to school and they were being bullied, and the bully was coming from other Mexican. It was
Exactly.
never
That's exactly what I went through.
it was never ever like Americans.
American to them, we were just Mexicans.
Yeah. And although sometimes they'll probably casually or sometimes say a wet bag or whatever, or a
Yeah.
beaner or whatever, but the most bullying was coming from other Hispanic or Mexican kids. Uh,
So question and look, how was the well, I was gonna say, like for me, the like we'll go back to the experience in
mhm,
Pueblo, because that's
mhm,
another topic too. But for me, I I was in elementary school where they had the bilingual school, right? Like the
mhm,
bilingual whatever program. So there were teachers teaching us Spanish, writing, reading, everything. Like they had like terms like they used some words that we never ever used in our life. Like for example, there was I remember clearly like there was this bird that is urraca, urraca. I'm like, what? I learned urraca, but never in my everyday life we used it. We just it was like a Spanish to Spain somehow, no? And then, but then we had this track. Like in that school, we had tracks. They call it tracks.
mhm,
Track A, track B,
uh-huh.
track C, track D. And we were in track. Todos los Hispanics were in track D. And whatever, whether it's positive or not, I don't know if that was positive, but they will categorize us. And then the school that you mentioning, Miller, right?
Mhm.
Like they didn't like it wasn't a district thing. It was more like they was saying like okay if you migrate or whatever you go to that school and if
No,
you advance whatever.
no,
How
no.
how do they
So,
categorize it?
well, kind of like how the school district has their school district. The bigger town that they are, they have like two school districts usually.
Oh, yeah.
By Santa Maria, they only had one school district. Well, they had the Santa Maria Bonita School District that covers the whole entirety of Santa Maria. But each school has their own like district line, where if you live within that district, then you go within that school. But if you live in a different road, then you go to the other school. And as was mentioned, Lincoln, we lived in Lincoln Street, so we went to Miller School. But right behind us in Pine Street, if you lived in Pine Street, you went to Adams. But it wasn't until fourth grade that they changed that. So they brought in some kids that lived in Pine Street
Mm.
to Miller
So
School.
it was kind of like
And
mixing.
yeah, and right there was where the level, well, some people call it redlining, other people call it,
Oh, they just even the politic turn over
yeah,
there.
yeah,
Oh, what?
the
I
red
didn't.
line.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you live in a better neighborhood, you're gonna get a better school that has better funding. And also, Miller School, I don't know if that they had better funding, but I did know that they were having better scores in most than the other elementary schools as well. And again, that's comparing Alvin, Adams, Fairfield, I had my cousins that went to Alvin, and they had a lot of friends that were speaking Spanish, and they kind of learned it more Spanish with them. They had cousins that went to Adams as well, and they had other cousins that went to Fairfield. I think from what I know now, and even back then as a kid, Fairfield had a lot of Oaxaqueño kids, same as Adam and Alvin. Um, Tano didn't have a lot of Oaxaqueño kids, even though my cousins went to Tano. Battles had also a lot of Hispanic kids in that school. But the Oaxaqueños was mostly, I think, Alvin Adams and Fairfield. And if you go through the neighborhood, you might be able to see why that was the case. And I think that that's still the same case right now,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
even though all the other school has Oaxaqueño and Mixteco people in them today. Um, but I think it doesn't also has to do just with that, the school districts and the line where it divided where we go on to. But also we didn't move a lot. So once my father got that house, rented that house, we lived in there for about 7 years. So we went within the same school. We never moved like the
Yeah,
other
yeah,
kids
for
too,
sure.
and we established ourselves with the teacher, with our friend groups and again, second generation Hispanic kids maybe already own their parents owns the house, so they don't have to move as often as
Yeah,
other
true.
kids. And yeah, or where parents are moving around because seasonal work in the agriculture field.
Yeah.
So then that changes their education. It affects them in their education negatively. And that didn't happen to us. My father and mother had a stable job at one company. Then we didn't have to move. Um, so that helped it with our education in elementary. And funny, talking about school. So we lived 3 blocks away from Santa Maria High School. I always figure eventually once I go to junior high in Fessler, I'll end up going to Santa Maria High School, which
You,
is 3 blocks up away from us. It was an area where I passed it almost every day to go to school in elementary. But that never happened. I never went to Santa Maria High School. Later on in life, I did went to Pioneer Valley for a couple months there in that school. But the school I always thought I would go to, I
you
never
didn't
ended
end up going.
up going.
Wow, it's crazy how our life works. You know how the little decisions. Like for example, if you would have lived in that street, you would have lived the other street. I don't know how your
Yeah,
experience would have been, honestly, because
yeah.
aside from you now learning navigating on your own, obviously, like it would have changed a little bit of the situation. Um,
Thank you for listening to our podcast. This has been Tachi Sabi, where our voices and stories come together. We hope today's conversation sparked a reflection, connection, and a deeper understanding of our shared experience. The conversation doesn't end here. Part 2 of Tachinyum Sabi is coming soon, where we dive in deeper into our stories, culture, and journey. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss it. You can connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Indigenous LS. And let us know your thought. Until next time, honor the past, embrace the present, and keep our culture